So as we know, in the beginning of the 1900s, after World War I, Britain is given a mandate over Palestine, which is the area put here, right? And out of this, they issued the Balfour Declaration, which says that they will support the creation of a Zionist state in Palestine, giving Israel and the Jews the homeland. So out of that, in 1947, we have the creation of the State of Israel when it's partitioned away from Palestine. But we know that this also creates a lot of problems, right? Because Palestine is already a thriving city filled with Muslims and people of the Islamic faith. And then you also have now the insertion of the Jewish population. And that's really where we get the beginning of these problems that we currently face in the Middle East. In Egypt, around the same time, we have the rise of nationalism and then the overthrow of King Farouk in the late 1940s. That leads to the rise of Nasser in the early 1950s, and thus begins the rise of nationalism in the area. We then know that there's the Suez Canal crisis, and if you remember, the Suez Canal is located right here, connecting the Mediterranean Sea to the Indian Ocean, and it cuts the trip for Britain, in particular, pretty significantly from London to Mumbai. When Nasser tries to nationalize the Suez Canal in 1956, you have the British and the French entering into the equation and trying to stop that. This begins the Suez Canal crisis, where you have problems between Britain and France trying to stop the Egyptians. But because of all the problems that are being experienced, with the Cold War and all that, the British and the French pull themselves out of the equation pretty quickly. And this shows that Britain really doesn't have the power anymore, and particularly doesn't have the power to stand up to its former colonies any longer. In Iran, the United States works diligently to get rid of the leader of the country, Mohammad Mossadegh, in 1951. And as a result of that, they put in a new leader, the Shah of Iran, who becomes like the king. In time, he will disagree with the United States, and he will remove himself sort of from the United States' favor. And it all sort of leads then to the Iranian Revolution, which occurs in 1976, which is right here, the Iranian Revolution, where the Ayatollah Khomeini will come to power. That's this angry-looking dude over here. And this is now based on fundamentalist principles, fundamentalist Islam, right? This is where you have a rise in sort of principles of the Islamic faith and the development of very high Islamic culture trying to be developed here, right? So that occurs in the late 1970s. More importantly, you have the rise, and sort of overshadowing all of this is the rise of the oil industry. So we know that through the 1900s, the necessity of oil becomes more and more apparent with the rise in cars, airplane travel, plastic goods. So the places that have oil then need to protect their goods. And in order to protect their goods, they form OPEC, which stands for the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. OPEC manages and negotiates prices with the rest of the world. Originally, it starts out with Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela, but today others are members as well, particularly Ecuador and Nigeria over here, and Libya and Algeria. Nigeria, Libya, Algeria, which occurs later, and they still operate today, and they sort of keep oil prices wherever they need to be. In order to protect our oil interests in the late 1980s or the 1990s, the United States invades Iraq in the first Gulf War to protect interest of oil, and that occurs in 1990. Other than that, just know that the Middle East and Iraq, the Middle East and North Africa face and experience a lot of problems in terms of nationalism and the oil industry in particular since the end of the First World War. Second World War. So, in the late 1970s, the policy of the Cold War changes, and in particular, it's sort of marked by this strategic arms limitation talks, which occur between Nixon and Brezhnev. Look at Brezhnev trying to kiss Nixon. Whoop, whoop. Anyway, so in 1972, the first SALT talks begin, and this is really marked by the term détente. And détente means an end of strain or a cooling of tension, which emerges in the 1970s. This policy, though it's begun under Nixon, is continued under Ford and Carter as well. However, there is sort of a few moments of ending of this détente, and it occurs when the Soviet Union invades Afghanistan in 1979. And this leads President Carter to issue his Carter Doctrine, which says that if the Soviet Union tries to get any control of the Persian Gulf, or more importantly our oil, we will find that as an assault on the U.S. interest, and we will get more involved. This then leads to the SALT II talks, where the United States and Brezhnev, again, he's not kissing Carter here, so you can tell it's not very happy. They're discussing the further limitation of nuclear weapons. And then I showed you this chart, which shows us, how we can see with each sort of different event, the nukes go down, right? Great. All of this sort of comes to a head because Brezhnev, pictured here, is trying to keep the Soviet Union together. Although through the 1970s, there is less and less favor in the Soviet Union. People are liking them less and less. And that's largely because of the rise in unemployment and the rise of dissatisfaction with the Soviet Union. So luckily, I suppose, Brezhnev dies in 1982, which then leads the way for the takeover of Mikhail Gorbachev in 1985. When Gorbachev takes over, his plan is to really start with policies of perestroika and glasnost. So perestroika is the opening of the economy, the restructuring of the economy, making sure that more capitalism can enter the Soviet Union. Whereas glasnost means openness, and that's obviously transparency in the government. This is all sort of more important when the Berlin Wall falls in 1989. What the falling of the Berlin Wall shows us is two things. First, it shows us that the Soviet Union was really, the countries in the Soviet Union were more and more upset with the socialists, right? Because East Germany was very much part of the Soviet Union up until then. By becoming not members of it any longer, that sort of shows us that they are no longer attached to their overarching or parent country. The second thing that it shows us is that the Soviet Union was willing to let countries go, and that they were not going to fight to keep this failing system going anymore. So by 1991, the Soviet Union breaks up, and we know that it's really over tensions, racial tensions and economic tensions that happens. And this gentleman here, Boris Yeltsin, takes over in 1991 as the new president.